Thank you so much for showing up tonight to the live stream. Good to be here. Make a few adjustments here with lights and everything. Yeah, it's a terrible glare. Let's see if we can. No, there's not much I can do about that. All right. Well, there it is. Welcome to the live stream. It is a pleasure to be here this Sunday night. Ben, greetings. Good to see you. Good to be here tonight. I am feeling better. I start to feel like I'm feeling better, and then about 20 minutes ago, I started feeling not so great again, but I said, I'm going to go on anyway. Actually, I'm all right. I feel a little bit better now. Maybe it was just a momentary setback there. But in any case, I am here and I'm glad to be here. Whether you're watching live tonight or in the rerun, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch it and listen to. I know a lot of you guys listen to me while you're working, and that's pretty cool, actually. I'll try to, give you something to chew on, something interesting while you do what you do. This week, I always like to start out with stuff that happened. Hey, Ben, I appreciate it. I'm the, what do they call this? Shiny apple. It looks beautiful on the inside when you cut inside of it. Actually, I'm doing better. I appreciate that. This week, gear-wise, I've been going through the process of slowly going through all of the stuff that I like, that I plan on keeping, and having work done on it. I've had my amps and my Echoplex and a few other things worked on recently. The latest piece of gear that I took in to my guy Gives was this pedal right here. Let me move my water. This right here, which is my Klon copy. And, I got that pedal. I've had that pedal now for about 7 years. I've had this one. It's in excellent condition because I really got it. And then I got my Blues Breaker, and I never went back to using this until recently. I was doing my little head-to-heads on my board with this against the Blues Breaker, and I actually found this to be far more versatile, which is another reason why I decided to let the Blues Breaker go, because I actually like this pedal, but I wanted to take it in, and there was something funky going on with the output, so I took it into him. And when I went to go pick it up, he said to me, Mike, where did you get this pedal from? It's a real good one. Now, I'll tell you something about him. When I first went to his shop with my Laney to get repaired, I was referred to him by Fern, my luthier. He had a similar clone type pedal sitting on his workbench, and I inquired about it, and he said he works on quite a few of them. He has quite a few of them, so he knows of what he speaks of, this guy, when he says that this one is a good one. I said, I'll have to think back on the story. I'll get back to you on that. Because apparently this has GE diodes in it. It's obviously, it's not a Chinese made one. I do remember that much. I ordered it from a company in California that they did the wiring themselves. For some reason, he told me that he was looking for parts from China. I didn't quite understand what he meant by that. And then the pedal showed up, in my mail one day, and I never put the two of them together. And I think the casing is what he was short of, because this casing on this is certainly, I've seen on most of the Chinese models, not exactly, there's a few differences with it, but pretty common. but certainly the wiring was done in the United States for this, all the parts and everything. And it is an excellent clone for what I paid for it. It was not cheap. It was $100 or something at the time, 7 years ago. So yeah, it was not cheap, but it's well made. It's beautiful, and he's confirmed with me that it is a good one as he speaks, and it is. So there it sits on my board permanently. I really find that if the Klon really, other than the Tube Screamer, you've got the Tube Screamer and you've got the Klon really competing for that boost for that overdrive boost. And of course, there is a lot of and the Blues Breaker to a certain extent, but really, I find it interesting that it was John Mayer who really gave. If you guys don't know the story, the Blues Breaker was on John Mayer's pedal board, right next to a silver Klon Centaur, and the real deal, obviously. And For a while there, I think that was from the Continuing album time. He was, from what I understand, debating between those two as to which boost he liked. The Bluesbreaker, interestingly enough, left. The Klon stayed. So that'll tell you something. I actually, having my Bluesbreaker and having this excellent Klon copy, and I came to the same conclusion myself, independent, just on my own, that honestly, between those two, a good Klon is really where it's at, because you can really do a lot with it. It is an extremely versatile pedal to have. So if you haven't really got into looking into them, it's something that you can do for inexpensive. They range in price. The cheap ones I would stay away from. I've talked about the Wish.com ones that I said are similar to the casing on this one, but those are Chinese made. But those have a good reputation to them. Those have been around for a long time as well. And then there's different companies that make them, and those go up accordingly, all the way up to KTR, which is the second generation. I like to call it the Klon second generation. Um, those are starting to hit $1,000 when they hit the market. I saw one in Japan for sale on Reverb today, and yeah, it was like 900. They wanted some odd bucks for it. And you know, it's really something how those have really gone up in price like that. And if you find a good one like this one, I really still don't see the need to spend that 5%. I just don't know. I full disclosure, I haven't played a real one, but those are my 2 cents on it. All right. Interestingly enough, my backup, I still haven't put my main computer in the shop. That is something that I am going to get to tomorrow. I've just been so busy, and my backup Mac, has been working like a dream. So I was able to shoot and edit, and just maybe 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago, put out a new video for regular content, not live content, but my scripted content, and that was talking about our Epiphones getting to be too expensive, and you know every week when I am sitting down and I'm thinking about trying to think at least a week or even 2 weeks ahead to what I'm going to shoot, what I'm going to film for, the upcoming content, to try to keep it interesting, because, sometimes I can really go down a pathway and I don't want to get into, part three, part four, part five of on any subject, and I don't think you guys really want to hear too much about that either. And but one thing that I do when I do come up with a subject that I'm thinking about doing, I do see, are there other YouTube videos that are doing the same thing? And let me get my water back here. And as far as videos concerning that Epiphone Joe Bonamassa 335, because it's been out for about a month or so now. But even with those older videos, when it first came out and we're talking about it, I can honestly say that there wasn't the level of interest in it as there was for, say, example, the Adam Jones new release. That seems to be the one that's the hot guitar. That seems to be the one that everybody that are looking forward to an Epiphone. That was the one that seems to be it. And I can understand why. Looking at the specs of that guitar, honestly speaking, it is a monster. And I mentioned it in the video that I just put out, talking a little bit about it. That you've got the correct headstock angle for that era of a Gibson guitar that it's emulating. You've got a one-piece neck with a long neck tenon. The paint job on it is excellent. Really looks good. The artwork on the back, it's subjective. Some folks like it, some folks don't. I happen to like it. I think it's absolutely gorgeous myself. But some of my friends says, I would get tired of it after a while, and I have to agree. Yeah, maybe. Or buckle rash. That thing is not going to hold up very well. Because even those, you can get buckle rash even on a poly spray guitar. But believe me. But in any case, just wonderful levels of craftsmanship that are. I mean, that in itself, everybody's saying, "Hey, how come Epiphone doesn't make? Why doesn't Gibson let Epiphone make guitars that are, like the Gibsons?" Well, there you go, kids. There's one that is, for all intents and purposes, it is the same build, other than a few differences, the poly versus nitro spray on it, whatever, than the custom shop in the States with all those accoutrements that it comes with. There you have it. That is, other than the name on the top, it is that guitar. It's a Gibson custom from that era. So I brought the Joe Stomer Mexican Cigarette Relic, and it's going back. The relic job is terrible. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Ben. Yeah, relic jobs are tough. And I'm glad, again, a good direction to go with this, especially concerning my final thoughts on this Joe Bonamassa guitar. Relicking is hit and miss, man. It's a tough one. And that's why I said, I'm still on the fence on relicking. I don't know what it was that made it terrible. I could probably guess. Y'all, it's here this. Y'all, it's here this. Huh? Anyway, it is really a tough one. I've seen a lot of relic guitars, and the whole concept over the years start to really take hold. And it's very rare that I've seen one that I thought was was cool, to the extent that I thought it was very real. There's always something that's a tell on it. I can't exactly put my finger on it, but I don't know. But with that Bonamassa 335 and its paint job, I have to say, I'm actually glad that it has a poly coat on it as opposed to nitro, to tell you the truth. Because one thing that I noticed when I was filming for my content for the discussion on that guitar was in the light that I had it in, you could really see that grain, even with my camera, which is actually a pretty good camera that I used to film those with. Uh, it was so beautiful that I would really want that to preserve for as long as possible. One of the things that I like about a quality vintage guitar, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, are the ones that have really retained their showroom look to them. Those are the ones that I gravitate towards, and that I think, especially like an old Gibson L5, L4 from the 50s. So if when those are well maintained, they are just gorgeous things to behold. So yeah, I can say that that is one thing that I do like about that guitar. I do like the poly finish. That makes two in a row. The 59 kit, I love that flat finish that they did on it, and when I buffed it out, it actually had a VOS look to it. It really is, you know, a fine instrument. In conclusion, with the conclusion I came to, it's kind of an outlier, that 335. And I didn't say it in the video, but I would like to say it here that I think the wise decision, if you're really going to get a 335 and you're looking to get a good quality one, um, that's made from Epiphone or Gibson. Of course, like I said, there's others out there on the market, but let's just talk about the ones that are made by Epiphone Gibson. I would really look at the Epiphones more than the Gibson ones. I really would. If you can get one of the older dots, Epiphone dots, those have rosewood fingerboards to them. If that's that's a key feature that those older ones have. That's pretty nice. The newer inspired by ones are great. I think they're fantastic guitars. I have to be honest with you. Um, but if you got a little bit more bread and you want to take a step up, then yeah, the JB 335 is pretty nice, man. It's funny, guys. I actually prefer playing it more than the 59, to tell you the truth. The Telecaster's in the shop. It's been in the shop for a while now, and getting that neck pickup swapped out there. So that's good news. Looking forward to check that out, as you guys know. But I was practicing because I'm trying to practice a lot more. It's one thing that I'm kind of a little lazy in doing is actually practicing. I'm always composing, and I guess that's a form of practicing because I'm playing the stuff and putting it together and arranging it as I go. But it's not the same thing as running scales and doing things like this. So I'm trying to do more like that. So I had my 59 on its strap, and I was standing, and I was just playing for it in front of the amp using my Laney and just playing up and running scales and chords and doing things for about 25 minutes. When I took it off, my shoulder right here really was aching. And yeah, that guitar weighs 8.2 pounds. Um, and really, I was surprised that I would have that kind of ache in my shoulder from just that amount of time of playing. Whereas when I play the 335, which is about the same weight, For some reason, I guess because of the distribution of that weight, it feels a lot lighter. It feels a lot more comfortable to play. Even just sitting down on the couch and playing, it's a far more comfortable playing guitar. And I've actually started gravitating towards playing it a lot. I said it was going to be a case queen, but the truth of it is, I'm kind of digging it. It's my first 335 that I've ever had. I always wanted one. I always said to myself, one of these days I'm gonna get, 60s, 67, 335 is the year that I'd like to get because of Larry Carlton. I love Larry Carlton. I love his playing. One of the my more favorite guitar playing works that he did was on Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark album. Um, and a lot of the guitar work that he did on that, like Free Man in Paris, was Larry Carlton. Um, Help Me, I do believe also. He was playing on a lot of that album he played on, and I listened to that album a lot. And that sound, that style of playing, and everything had a big influence on me. And so 335 is something that I've always wanted. And now, you always want something, and then sometimes you get it and you're like, yeah, maybe this wasn't the right thing for me. I kind of dreaded that when I started my Les Paul search all those years ago, over a decade or so ago now. And that maybe it just wasn't for me, but I've actually grown, I've gravitated towards them. I like them, but especially the sound. However, yeah, they're not something that I would take on stage to play at this point, to be honest with you. If I started playing live again with a band, there's no way that I would go on stage with, my hat's off to Jimmy Page at his age. That he still plays those Les Pauls. I on stage. I was just watching the celebration. They had it up on YouTube concert from the O2. Yeah, I was just there. I was like, wow, at that time, that was what? That was 2007. I was like, wow. At that time in his early 60s or so, Jimmy Page was still doing it with those Les Pauls. I don't know how. I couldn't do 25 minutes with mine standing in my living room. So I'm kind of digging that 335 a lot, man, and I'm finding the neck on that very comfortable. It's got a really wide neck and it's like it's not D shape, it's like C shape with a big flat neck, and it's just you can really chord well on that thing. Uh, you know, it's really something, and I'm really enjoying it. And it's funny that I've taken to it so much. Uh, I think I think the 59 is going into its case for a little while, and I'll be playing that 335 actually a lot more than I thought I would because I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying playing it a lot. So there's that. Yeah, okay. So today's subject, I always like to find something to talk about with you guys that I find interesting. And, last week we were talking and I said something because I listened back to the rerun just to try to fact check myself sometimes to make sure that I was correct. If I say something wrong, I try to clean it up down in the comments section. But I made the statement that just because a guitar is vintage doesn't mean that it's good. And I think I should have elaborated a little bit more on what I meant about that because it came off as me being very flippant, but I was actually very serious. That's not an original quote by myself. That's something that a vintage guitar dealer in Japan that I spoke to quite a while now, last time I was there, uh, he said to me, and he was saying just because it's vintage doesn't mean that it's good. A true vintage guitar has certain qualities to it. Now, first of all, what is really considered a vintage guitar. Well, any guitar that was produced prior to 1970s at this stage of the game in 2022 is considered to be a vintage guitar. So that means now the 68 and the 69 Les Pauls are considered to be vintage. And in the 1970, a lot of those SGs that they produced in the 70, that transitional period with the tenon, those are considered vintage now. And that means that the guitars that are produced between 1980 and 1970, that 10-year period, are right on the cusp of being considered being vintage. They're actually in a transitional period. They're considered going into vintage. Now, when I was down at Barry's shop, and you saw in the footage where I had that 1975 Burgundy wine Burgundy Les Paul Custom, and I was making a statement that these are really going to start going up in price, and these are going to be considered vintage shortly. So by the end of this decade, those guitars are going to be considered to be vintage. Now, um, you know, what are the things that make something truly vintage in the way that that guitar seller or that vintage dealer was trying to get across to me? What was he really trying to say to me? And since he said it to me, I guess it's something that I should, put out there, explore a little bit. And I feel that he was really saying, or I know that he was saying, is that, at the time that those guitars were being manufactured, they were putting out some pretty good guitars that were made with really old woods, very rare woods, like the Brazilian rosewood. Try to get that anymore. Very hard to obtain a guitar made with that. And old woods, 100-year woods. We've talked about all this. But a lot of those, some of those were dogs. And, you can go out and get yourself a vintage guitar, and it may have some value to it in terms of its vintage. Here, I'll give you an example. I have one in my exact, and actually a true example. I went to, when the last time I was in LA was 2019. It's hard to believe. It's been so long since I was in Los Angeles. But when I was there, I went guitar safari on one of my guitar safaris, buying guitars out. And I told the story how I bought that 1993 Les Paul Classic. And one of the reasons I went and hunted this guitar down and bought it in LA is because it was a guitar that was of the same build quality of a custom shop. It didn't say classic on it. It said Les Paul. By the way, they didn't have a classic stamp on it. It said Les Paul on it. And there was a few other things about a long neck tenon it had. It was a really high quality build, big, really nice top. So it was a premium plus, is what it was designated as. And they didn't make a lot of them. And this one, between this period of the beginning of 93 to around the October-ish of 93, that was all they produced of these that had these kind of distinction to them that gave them a little bit of value to them. All that said, it was the absolute worst Les Paul that I ever owned. I hated the neck. The neck was so thin. It was ridiculous thin. It just, I don't like a slim neck profile. I have to be honest with you. I like my necks to have a little bit of meat to them. You know, I got pretty big mitts for a guy my size. Uh, so I like a neck that's got a lot of girth to it, and that guitar really just was the pits. The other thing is that it did not have its original pickups in it. Somebody had put in 57 classics. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was those 57 classics. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to change anything about it because it was, again, it was a Case Queen. It was something that I bought with the intention of moving on, which I did, for profit, which I did. But I hated the way that guitar sounded too. It was just a dog. I didn't enjoy playing it. I didn't like the way it sounded. Um, yeah, even though that is a guitar that has a little bit of a pedigree to it, and it's something among the Les Paul collectors is desirable, it was a dog. In my opinion, it was a dog. And to think in 20 years, when guitars from the 90s become vintage, is that how that works? Yeah, 80s, yeah, good. And then going 20 years, when 20 years from now, when that's considered to be a vintage guitar, it's going to be a dog. It's still going to be a dog. And that's just the fact of the matter. And so a lot of these guitars that are considered vintage, some of them are dogs. And, so what are you really looking for? And it's amazing to me too that with vintage gear that with the cutoff point being 1970 to be considered vintage. I've actually really never owned any true vintage gear. The only thing that I've had are vintage some of my effects, my 70s pedals, like in my Echoplex, for example. But again, like I said, that's not vintage quite yet. That's still transitional period. Still got another 8 years or so to go before it's considered to be vintage. So that's something to me. I've really never owned any true vintage guitars or pedals. And I've owned a lot of stuff that I consider, and I'm sure you guys would consider to be pretty old. Like this pedal right here, this Noble's preamp booster pedal. This one is from 1990. Yeah, from 1990, somewhere in around there, 90, 93, 94, somewhere in there, 92, 93. And I consider that to be doggone old because that's before I even started touring in Japan. This pedal was around. And believe me, that was a long time ago now. I started touring in Japan in 95. And so that's something that how if you can really consider the age of something that's considered to be vintage too, and what's the likelihood over the course as that thing continues on that it's going to retain its quality to it, uh, they get rarer and rarer because one slip up or somebody handling it doesn't know what it is, or because that happens, things of that nature. The that marketplace gets smaller and smaller, and then of course when it gets in the hands of collectors, they just tend to they disappear into the ether, the black hole of the true guitar collectors collection. So I think that one of the things that makes a vintage piece interesting, and like I said, the only piece that I had are like some of my older Japanese effect pedals from the 70s that I was collecting when I was in Japan, that I recently traded, by the way, and my EP3. Yeah, the story behind them is what I think is another thing that attracts me to a vintage piece that I think is something that it gives it a little bit of intrinsic value, I suppose. Yeah, it's kind of the right story. Like my Echoplex, it was a one owner guy, the guy that I bought it from, and he had a huge studio down in Riverside, and just had the mad collection of vintage compressors, EQs. The board was a Neve board. Just a great little studio, and he was just selling a lot of the stuff in there that he had. And I don't even think this was. I think he had a few Echoplexes, and he was letting this one go. So that had a story to it, and it was this guy had it, and he had it for X amount from 75. So I like stuff like that. So that also, if I like to know the story behind something, or if it's a brand new guitar, to that it's got a story to a little bit to it. I like those kind of things. Yeah, if I think about a lot of my guitars, every one of them has a story to it. That 40th anniversary, the Joe Bonamassa 335 and the 59, they all have interesting stories behind them. And we talked about construction as the last thing, that even though a lot of those guitars were being produced, that doesn't mean that they were all fantastic, and that actually quite a few of them were duds. So, what makes a guitar vintage? It's not just the age. Is the conclusion that I've come to over the years. It's not. I used to think just be oh great. It's a 1965 Strat or whatever. Hardtail. And I used to think that's great. I've become a little bit more discerning than that now. Like, well, where did you get it? Who's owned it? Was it played? How much was it played? If it was really played, that tells me it's a good one. But if it was overplayed, then it's going to have some issues. If it's underplayed, then maybe it's just not a great one, and people weren't using it, or it was sitting around in somebody's case, which is not good either. So yeah, you become a little bit more. Is there a story behind it? Who owned it? How's it holding up? How does it sound? At the end of the day, things like that. So you become a little bit more discerning, actually, over the years if you get around and you start looking into that kind of stuff. Would I ever own? I know several of you guys out there own vintage guitars. Would I myself like to own a vintage guitar? I've got to tell you, I didn't have a lot of interest until I saw that Burgundy 75 Custom down there at Dirk Woodshop that Barry has. I really love that guitar. I have to be honest with you, I would love to have it. It sounds great. You know, I would love to have that guitar. To be honest with you, that would be if $6,500 US he's asking for it. That would be worth it to me. If I had the money to get into that level of a guitar, that would be the one that I would go for. I would gladly spend that money for that one and be happy about it. And then in another 8 years, yeah, I've got a vintage Gibson. Same thing if I could find a real Casino Epiphone from, what is that, 65 or so, I would love to have one of those and say, yeah, I got a vintage Epiphone. All of that would be awesome. But those are the two really. The 67 335. That's not on my wish list anymore. That's how much I really love that 335 that I just got. That thing is a killer guitar. It really is. And when I play it here through my pedal board, wow, it really is something. Wasn't a big fan of those Brushbucker pickups, as you guys know before, so much so that I took them out of that 59 Epiphone Les Paul, and and because that just didn't sound right to me. The middle position sounded great, but there's just something just lacking in the bridge and in the neck pickup. But in the 335, they're perfect. I couldn't think of a better set of pickups to put in there. They're actually well balanced and they sound great. So I think that's what those pickups are best for. Even though the Burst Barker 3 is the hottest or one of the second hottest pickup that they put out in that line, um, in their pickup line, still it has a mellow quality to it. It's got a dig to it, but it's got a nice roundness to it that I didn't find when I had them in the Les Paul. I have a set of Buckers sitting in an envelope here, right here on the floor behind me that I took out of that Les Paul 59. So now I have, I can't get rid of these things. I think this is literally the fourth set of Buckers I've had. And I keep tossing. Finally, I found the guitar they sound good in, and thank God it came with them. So, these right here, I'll hold on to them. Something will come along else that they'll sound good in. So in any case, there's that. So those are my thoughts on vintage. I thought I would talk about that tonight because I found it to be an interesting subject. Because as I said, just because it's a vintage guitar doesn't mean that it's a good one. And if you're looking into going into that vintage game, you really should be aware of some of the pitfalls that you should be looking out for. And, you know, one of the things that attracts me to that 75 Les Paul Custom that Barry has that I love so much, that I'm gushing about, is because it's got that buckle wear. It's been relic. It was relic by time, and naturally, and that tells me it was played, and well taken care of because the truss rod still has some life in it. The frets, I don't think it's been refretted, but it's been played, and it's got you can feel it, and it's been played right so that it just feels good. It feels right in all the right places. And that's just something you can't fake. That takes time, and that is something that uh, I consider to be a plus. Some folks don't like that. Some folks are like, "Why the hell are you buying, a guitar that's been wore out like that? I'd just buy a new one." And I dig that. That's a valid point. I don't always go for them, but there's some that are just worn in right. It's just like it's like an old leather coat. And it really is. It's like one of those old leather coats from back in the day. You go to a secondhand shop and you put it on. And you know what? It's somebody broke this in. This just feels good, and yeah, it's kind of the same thing. So, just my 2 cents on that. Um, last subject tonight. Apparently, uh, the guy over at PRS Guitars came out. Paul Smith came out and said that the Tonewood thing uh, really is intrinsic to the wood. So the sound of the guitar, that the wood really does play a part into the overall tonal qualities of what you're getting through the amplifier. And a lot of guitar magazines apparently were coming out and saying, okay, that's it. Paul Smith has spoken. The tone wood debate is over. Yes, tone woods are important. I don't know if any of you guys saw that. And then of course the other guys came out and said, well, he was talking about violins and the resonance of violins as opposed the acoustic resonance as opposed to the electrified resonance through the pickups is apples and celery. You're comparing there, and he was comparing there, and so no. that's not true. And I just find it fascinating that here we are in the internet age. I could understand if this was 1975, then again, like I said, if we're still having this kind of discussions, because we don't know better. We just don't know better, and there's a lot of mythos and a lot of stuff floating around that time, and it just surprised me so much to hear that still is going on today. I don't care which side of that you fall on, whether you believe that tone woods play a role in the overall sound of the guitar or you don't. I've certainly made my position clear on it. However, uh, I will say that I stick my toe on the other side of the tone wood fence sometimes when I think about the construction of guitars. Like, for example, a Les Paul has mahogany with a maple cap, whereas an SG is just a mahogany and a maple neck, whereas an SG is a maple body and a maple neck. And there are tonal qualities that are different between an SG and a Les Paul. And so maybe that maple cap has something to do with that. I think about that because, that is something that, I own both an SG and a Les Paul, and I can tell you that that's something that I hear. That's one of the things that makes an SG sound the way it does, is a deeper tone to it. Anyway, I throw that out there. I still believe it's 80% of the pickups. That's why I always qualify that and say that it's pickups are 80% of the game. The other ones are your speaker and and maybe a little bit to the tone woods. I don't know. We'll see. But I still find it surprising that in this day and age, these kind of discussions are still going on. These kind of arguments. When there have been guys on YouTube who have shown that, yeah, actually the tone woods don't matter, especially that guy who's just using any old household items and making guitars out of them and making them sound similar to, regardless of whether they were encased in maple or iron. So there's that. But this guitar, it just got me thinking about guitar myths from back when I was young. I'm a child of, I became I don't know how it is. Do are your formative years, I guess, are your teenage years, I suppose. So in that regards, I turned a teenager in 1980. So I suppose that makes me a child of the 80s, I guess. Yeah, I suppose. Although I remember the 70s quite well. Quite well. I remember certain days in the 70s. I remember when Magic Mountain in Valencia, California first opened in 70, early 70s, 75, somewhere around there. And I can remember going there and what that day was like and what it felt like and what it looked like. And so I don't know. A lot of the music that I listened to, of course, came from the 1970s. So I don't know about being a child of the 80s. I still kind of identify with the 70s side. Although certainly going through high school and college during the 80s was, a big thing. But back then, among guitarists, my gosh, it was all bullshit, myths. I told you, it's funny, things change. When I first started, everybody, you had to play nines or even eights. A lot of the guys played really light gauges. And why did they play light gauges? They played light gauges because supposedly it gave you more sustain. Fast forward to so at some point it flipped, whereas people said, "Oh, I play 11s and even 13s." Prince played 11s. Why? Because it gives you more sustain. Both statements can be true, or can they? I guess it really depends upon on who's playing guitar. But I grew up through that. It's funny watching. I watched that flip for when I was young, and I still play nines. I play my own. They're a heavy set of nines. They're custom set that are skewed more towards a tens as they go up in the gauge, but they start out as nines. And but in any case, that stems from when I was younger, and I haven't switched from that, And I guess then other things, and then the whole nitro poly thing, that came about from the '70s, as well. But it's weird because, again, all of the Fender guitars were polys. I never quite understood that either. Um, you know. The original salesman's on pitch for nitro was it makes the wood breathe easier. Yeah, it does that, but boy, it sure does start to weather check. If you set it in different rooms and different temperatures, that nitro finish gets checked. And weather checking and a whole lot of other things. You put it on the wrong kind of stand, and you'll get a stand mark forever. So yeah, and then the poly thing, well, a poly guitar, it sounds dull, or they don't ring as good, or the wood can't breathe as much. All that stuff is baloney stuff that started back then, and it's still going on to these days. It's amazing to me. You know, either finish is okay. It really depends upon what you're looking for. If you want a real delicate finish, get a violin finish. Then you're talking about an antique finish, I guess. That is what that is really called. Then you got yourself a really delicate finish. You better wear like white gloves when you buy one of those antique finishes, because those things, boy, man, you sneeze on that thing, it gets a dent in it. No, I like poly finishes myself. I'm kind of digging them. I don't mind it so much, and yeah, a lot of that '70s stuff, a lot of that hocus pocus, a lot of the magic, where you got and the mythos, and a lot of that stuff. It's interesting to me that to this day and age, it is still going on. And it's funny. I guess it's whatever it takes to sell guitars or keep the controversy going. I haven't figured it out. You know. I like the guys who just say, "Who cares about all that stuff? Just play the damn thing." I'm falling into that camp myself. If you find something that works, then work it. That's funny to me. But in any case, he said that, and now the whole debate. Paul Smith says that, and now that whole hornet's nest is stirring up on the internets again. It's like, oh God, really? Nah, man, get yourself a good set of pickups, get yourself a really good amp with a really good speaker, and you got the battle won. You could plug anything into that, and especially the good amp with the good speaker. I'm really blessed to have that vintage Celestion. Well, see, it's not even that one. That's a '73 speaker, so it's a transitional period. So it's not quite vintage yet. It's got another 8 years. See, I didn't have anything that was. All my stuff was from the '70s. My American and British and Japanese vintage gear. All that stuff was from the '70s. It wasn't vintage. It wasn't considered vintage yet. It's transitional period. I've never owned a true piece of pre '70s gear. I don't know if you guys have, but I never had. The '70s, early '70s, was my cutoff point in a lot of my stuff. It was good stuff. When it came time to trade it off, I was able to trade it off for things of proper value that I consider were going up. I don't mind trading those pedals for that Joe Bonamassa 335, to be honest with you, because quite frankly, it is a fine guitar that I can't put down. All right, guys, I am going to call it quits for this evening, a little bit earlier tonight. because let's be honest with you, I need to recover. I am doing better. I am feeling better, and I appreciate you guys sticking around. The few of you guys that did stick around, everybody who did show up, and everybody who watches this on the reruns. I want to say thanks, guys. I really do appreciate you taking the time to stop by and watch these live streams and listen to me ramble on for a little bit. It is a lot of fun. Thanks, Ben. I appreciate you a lot, man. You're a real trooper hanging in there. Um, and you guys are really great. I am on the mend. I was really amazed to be able to shoot and edit and put something out this week. So if you guys haven't taken a look at that, please do take a look at that content that I just released. Yeah, that's it for this week. I don't, I have some stuff here that I've been wanting to review. And it's going to be one of these pedals. I can't remember which one I want to talk about. It may be getting really back to this pedal board. As you guys can see, I've made some changes on it, and some things got cut out. I'll be honest with you. One last thing, the JHS Charlie Brown did not make the number 476 is the number on this one. Interesting. Somebody wrote the number on the back at JSX on this one. I was not in love with this pedal. It lacked the amp-like quality of this 7 series from Tommy's Lumpy's Tone Shop. This thing really has the qualities of an amp. The articulation, the movement of the sound when you move your fingers against the strings, really amp-like. This sounded dull and muffled. And no matter what I did, even running it through my Klon, which helped a lot, but then when I would A/B it between it and my 7 Series Overdrive, it was so embarrassing how this just doesn't hold up against that pedal. I don't know if it's this one in particular. I don't know if it's something inherent to this one. Yeah, you're going to hear that for sure, Ben. I'll be picking that up from Fern on Tuesday. So we'll yeah, let's cover that. That's actually something I could do, and I'll run that, and maybe I'll show you what I'm talking about. But yeah, I wasn't really impressed with this one, to be frank, and it didn't make the cut on my board. So there it shall sit, on my shelf as a decoration, because I do collect pedals. So I won't be letting it go, but no, it's not something that is on my pedal board. Interesting enough, the Joyo California Sound beat it out. Wow, I dig that. A $20, $30 pedal beat out, in my opinion, in terms of sound quality, that JHS Charlie Brown. And in terms of quality, the clarity, the response, articulation response, everything, this Joyo California beat it out. So take of that what you will. Interesting enough. Yeah, so we'll get into some stuff this week, guys. I do appreciate you showing up. I take great pleasure in sitting here every week and talking to you. And I hope that you guys please take care of yourselves, and we shall speak again here soon. I believe that. Yeah, I believe it. You guys take care, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.